Well, you mentioned some of the numbers and the taxation. The legislature approved rolling back the state income tax from 4.25% to 4.15%. How will that benefit the state, or will it hinder state programs?
Well, I support it. Because I think it's one small step at trying to restore some tax fairness for average taxpayers in this state. Let's not forget that the tax rate in this state in 2011 was scheduled to roll back at 0.1% for 4 years till it went back to 3.9%. The governor and the Republican legislature stopped those. Last I knew, that was called a tax increase. That's a silent tax increase that Michigan families have had to pay because as their taxes were scheduled to roll back, they had to stop that. And again, that was to pay for a $2 billion corporate tax cut. So I support tax relief for middle-class families. I support tax relief for the hardworking people in my district who have had to see their taxes go up to finance the ability of corporations to get off scot-free. One thing I will mention, when we had this debate, the potential in the next couple years, you talk about long-term consequences of decisions, businesses writ large in the state are projected to have negative tax liability to the state of Michigan. That means individuals who work will be paying 100% of the freight for the services and programs that state government provides that we all benefit from.
Mr. Lowersdorfer, same question about rolling back the state income tax.
Absolutely. We need to do everything we can to make sure people have as many resources and assets in their pocket, and we keep as much of the money we work hard to earn so that we can reinvest in our community, that we can build, and that we can grow. And that's where the recovery comes from. That's where the progress comes from our work, from our rebuilding, not from artificial Lansing construction. It comes from us working together for our community, growing, developing, and moving forward.
We're going to stick with education here, and you mentioned it in your question there. Common Core state academic standards has been debated, and its implementation has been delayed. Do you support the standards or oppose them? Please tell us why.
You know, I voted to help, implement the Common Core standards, but I'm not wedded to Common Core specifically. I think our state needs to have a set of rigorous standards that are globally across the board matching up with what other countries are doing, because honestly, our kids need to be competing with those jobs on a global level. We need to have those standards in place so that we can ensure that teachers across the state are doing, the similar things in their classrooms. But this is not about pre-prescribing to a teacher how to teach inside their classroom. My biggest concern is about the testing component that has come along with Common Core. And this idea that we have gotten into simply testing our kids, we cannot simply test our way to quality education in our state. And we have got to empower our teachers to be able to have the innovation and creativity back in their classrooms where it belongs, teaching them to be critical thinkers.
Typical pack, I've been told by some of the DNR, could be 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 wolves. There really are only 2 mating pairs in a pack, the alpha male and the alpha female. The rest are generally, the pups, the grand pups of that until they break off and form their own pack. There is some belief that we have now hit sort of our maximum wolf level for predation. It's not predation, but for them to be able to hunt, sustain themselves. I am not a scientist, and I have no understanding if that is true.
If I can jump in about the science issue, which is extremely important, is though last fall a panel of world-renowned wolf scientists, including Rolf Peterson and John Vucetich at Michigan Tech, Jeremy Bruscotter at Ohio State, scientists at University of Wisconsin-Madison, submitted a detailed paper basically saying that the wolf hunt as submitted by the DNR was not backed by sound science and should be stopped immediately.
What does science say the wolf population in the Upper Peninsula should be or could be?
There's not really a maximum limit, and you're right. Some of the biologists have suggested that we may be hitting that, but the goal of the hunt isn't to reduce the overall wolf population across the UP. It's actually designed not to impact it.
Speaking of some big dollar projects, transportation funding in the state, the governor says over the next 10 years to get roads and bridges to, I guess, a reasonable standard, the state's going to need to invest about $10.5 to $10.8 billion per year over the next 10 years. Where will that money come from? Are you in favor of taxes and fees, or looking for areas to make cuts to fund those improvements?
My approach would be to prioritize our spending. I agree we need to invest more in our roads and our infrastructure and our bridges around the state. But I'm not supportive of raising taxes in order to do that. And I think we've got a great opportunity as our economy gets better and we get more revenues into the state of Michigan, that we can prioritize that spending, find efficiencies in state government. You know, we have a $52 billion state budget, and it's a lot of money that the taxpayers of Michigan give to allocate to the state. And I just think we need to make sure we do a good job of spending that, prioritizing it, and put it in areas where we need it most, and roads and bridges is one of those. And although the proposal to raise a gas tax didn't happen and didn't get enough support in the legislature, we were able to find existing revenues, almost $1 billion over the next 2 years, in additional to what we already spend to invest in our roads and bridges. So that's why you're seeing a lot of construction out there as you drive around today all over West Michigan and all over our state. And I think you'll see significant improvements being made in our infrastructure over the next couple of years because of this additional investment.
These are already being introduced. If it's going to help the profits of companies, they're going to use whatever is available as far as technology to increase those profits. If that's, I mean, we're talking about companies whose existence, their basis of existence is to make profits, is to make money for their shareholders. So, you know, the mechanization of some of the labor is already happening, whether or not we touch the minimum wage. So, you know, increasing the minimum wage is not necessarily going to lead to increased technological introductions in the
mechanization is happening, but you can speed it up.
But you gotta also understand, though, that, you know, there are only a certain amount of tasks that can be done by machines. You're still gonna need human beings, and as far as I can tell, you know, Walmart, with their very low wages and their profits, right now are not just firing everyone and getting some robots to man the cash registers. They still have some workers.
Are these jobs that cannot be taken then offshore? Are these jobs that
they tend to
would
be, yes.
not leave
yes.
the country? And
it
again,
would be
we're talking about that. It's basically 2%.
Yeah. Well, it would be difficult to, you know, have your drive-through from,
right.
I don't know, across the
we can call
sure.
that in from
but there's other ways you can affect it. I mean, right now Walmart offers health care to their full-time employees. Well, if you say you have to pay this amount, and well, they can cut into their health care benefits by not offering it. I mean, there's lots of ways.
Another mandate.
Right. I mean, mandates are going to drive up prices, or they're going to distort incentives some way. Now, you know, you can say that's good or bad, but they do happen no matter how you want to slice it. And so there's different things that they can do, make employees pay for their uniforms, things like that.
Would you support American troops on the ground?
Based on the information he's provided to me, no. Now, if he calls us back into session, if the president says, I want Congress back here and I want to share some information with them in a classified setting, and he can make the case that this is a fight we have to fight, then I'm always open to all the options. I think we need to protect Americans. The role of the federal government is to protect our national security, to protect the rights of Americans, and to provide for our defense. And so I would not take anything off the table, including ground troops, if that were necessary. But he hasn't made the case to me that this is the fight we have to take on.
Mm-hmm. So at the present point, you're not really convinced there's a vital American interest in the Middle East, even with some beheadings and things like that. You really need more evidence than you see in the public media, and that's in the...
Well, for a full-scale war, yeah. I think you need more evidence that there is an imminent threat to the United States. Mm-hmm. People right here in the United States. And we haven't seen that yet from the administration. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't exist, but if it does exist, the administration hasn't shared that information. And it's my opinion that they should share that information. And if they do share it and it's clear-cut, then the president shouldn't be worried about, and neither should the Speaker of the House, be worried about having a vote for authorization of force. And we haven't had that vote.
So you're defining imminent threat to the United States really as the geography of the 50 states in the United States, not really American interests abroad, but you're really focused on, is there a threat to us, our territory?
Primarily the United States.
Yeah.
We do have troops overseas. We do have journalists overseas. Mm-hmm. We've seen the horrific acts of terror and violence. And as I said, I'm not opposed to the U.S. taking action to go after those who have committed those acts. But when it comes to a full-scale war, which may include ground troops, the president had better make the case to Congress and to the American people, and Congress has to have a vote on that use of force.
You know, this is where we kind of get into that. You know, we talk about the rainy day fund here, and then this is an election year, and already this week you have a tax writing committee in Lansing debating legislation to drop Michigan's income tax rate from 4.25% to 4.05%, and I think another 0.1% by 2017. Is this a wise thing to do? Because we all know there are the good times and then the bad times come along, and it's difficult to raise taxes once you cut them.
Yeah. You know, I'm not a real fan of saying we're going to give up the future revenue. My feeling is if you're going to do something, let's pay for it now. Let's identify it. Let's pay for it now. You know, to say we're going to just go ahead and give up. And what if we hit a downturn next year? You know, and the money's not there. And obviously a new, you know, makeup of a legislature and, you know, is going to have to deal with that. But at the end of the day, I think that what we came up with was a very balanced budget. You know, there are some that want us to give it all back. There are some that want us to raise taxes, do additional things. But what we came up with was, I mean, it's a culmination of hours and hours of work. And I think if the Michiganders or if people take a step back and say, what's really in this budget? They'll say, okay, they did some tax relief to give some money back, but given the circumstances and the cuts to higher ed and the needs in K-12 and our public safety needs, and we still have four cities that are on the most dangerous list here in the country. And so at the end of the day, we've come up with a very balanced, well thought out approach. And again, the great news is that it's what we said we'd do in the beginning. We hit the reset button and the economy started growing, and we've been able to make those strategic investments.
So what about the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare? One of the positions of the House Republicans has been many votes to repeal it. One can imagine that a Republican Senate and a Republican House will want to act on something that seriously peels it back or repeals it. What would you do? How would you see that working? Do you still have a Democratic president?
Couple things. I joked that we turned this into a sports show before we got started, and maybe we still can, but no. So even the most optimistic Cubs Republican, all right, will tell you, no, we're not going to have a 2/3 majority in the House or in the Senate. You're going to have to deal working together, all right? You're in the sandbox together. We got to figure out, there's a lot of problems with the Affordable Care Act, or as even the president calls it, Obamacare. So whether it's the 30-hour work week, and I met with a gentleman this morning, and their insurance premiums for his small business are going up 50%. And he's going to struggle. I know that he is. He is going to struggle with, well, do I just get out of this and put all of my employees, he's paying $1,200 a month per employee, am I going to just put them into the Obamacare exchanges? They're going to not have as generous a plan. They're not going to, I'm not going to have to pay for them. I'm going to pay a much smaller fee for this because of the fines. But I have to compete with the rest. I mean, why can't we change the number of hours to be eligible from 30 back to the 40-hour work week? I mean, most of us know what a 40-hour work week is, right? Walmart, just 2 weeks ago now, announced that they're going to cancel their plan for 30,000 Walmart employees. My guess is, excuse me one second, my guess is, didn't work, did it? It's water. My guess is that those employees would probably have preferred to keep their Walmart insurance rather than being forced into whatever that state exchange is. So what we have to do is we have to identify, and we have sort of the many flaws that are there, and see if we can't build a bipartisan coalition. So
I want to break down some of the demographics. Yeah. We've discussed some of that. Women voters, Gen Xers and millennials. I mean, we remember that from President Obama's first push, his first term in office. The boots on the ground, social media. But we were in studio last night, radio from 9 to 12 with local coverage, and we talked about a number of these things. And Roger Moyles, who's a political scientist at Grand Valley State University, he was sitting in with me, and he said, these millennials they're not turning out. There's nothing there that is appealing to them, and especially in a midterm election.
Well, I think what the problem is that, and I think to a large extent, it's what the Democratic Party and Lon Johnson discovered last night is that, you know, you can work as hard as you want to and knock on doors multiple times, and among those voters that are only part of the time voters, there's less of a likelihood that they are going to take action and go to the polls and participate based on the party than there is when there's an individual like the popularity of Barack Obama or an individual that they really feel strongly about. And it is the individual, the strong candidate, that can get them to the polls. And the party is not a substitute for a good candidate. And Mark Schauer was not successful as an individual enough to appeal to them just based on what he brought to the table.
It's often painted as Democrats don't really turn out for midterms. Is that the case, or is that just a...
That is the case, yeah. Although this time it was different than 2010, just based on that party base number. 44 Republican, 38 Dem back in 2010, and they swept all the education posts. This time, they in the urban pockets, they were able to turn out enough votes to win the education post, but outstate, in a lot of those other congressional districts, they didn't have the kind of base that would help the Democratic candidates who are running for Congress.